And welcome to the Fiscally Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gardner, co-founder and CEO of Hiline. Today, we have a super awesome conversation with Harini Karthik, co-founder and CEO of Zetta. Harini is a data guru. She's done big data for very, very big companies, and now her mission is bringing data analytics to small businesses and making it accessible. We get a super engaging conversation, and I'm excited to jump into it. All right, Harini, welcome to the Fiscally Awesome pod. Thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm really good. Thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about something that is very relevant, super exciting for me. So data, specifically, in the world of AI and technology and where we're going. I think data is like this big, scary problem for a lot of companies, specifically subscale small businesses. And I think that, decision making in general, everything ties back to data. Everything is data. We do finance. A general ledger is data. So like how you use that data, I think can just empower you to make really impactful decisions. So before we kind of jump into Zetta and data and all the cool things that you're doing, maybe just help us understand where you've came from, some of the things you've done in your career around data.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my data career with Target, and since then I've been leading and heading data teams at various tech startups such as GoFundMe, Shipt, and Loom. And at all these companies, I was heading all things data, including data engineering and data infrastructure, the data analytics and data science and machine learning. And really at all these companies helped use data to drive growth using data insights as well as data products. And that is where I realized that I had helped create a successful playbook that I wanted to open it up and really provide to many companies, because I was helping one company at a time. And I really felt I really wanted to help millions of companies out there that currently don't have access to a lot of data analytics to make better decisions. And it takes companies millions of dollars and several years to set up data analytics, and
Yeah.
helping make that instant was something that was very exciting to me. And that's how Zetta was born.
So you did like big data. So this was like massive data infrastructure that you were overseeing at those companies.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're all, millions of users and really large scale. And I think I have had the opportunity to work at large scale companies as well as medium, as well as smaller startups. And while the scale is slightly different, which just means there may be slight differences in architecture, the fundamental business questions are identical, all scales across all business models. So I think that was the other reason where I think there can be a common framework that we can help provide to a lot of companies to help them grow.
So most of our listeners are going to be in the small business sector. And we'll generally, it's industry agnostic, but it's going to be earlier stage companies, whether
Yeah.
they're software, services, marketing agencies, nonprofits. They hear data analytics and they just hear a buzzword, right? So what does data analytics mean for you in like the simplest terms? Like how should a small company think about data analytics?
Yeah. The simplest way to think of data analytics is understanding where your customers are coming from, how they're using your product, and what they're finding valuable and who you're retaining. Ultimately, it's the entire customer life cycle of acquisition, activation, engagement, retention, revenue, and lifetime value. And I think that customer journey it's really about just understanding that. And that's how we can help grow the acquisition or the engagement or the revenue. It's through that deep understanding of how it all pieces together.
It's the same. So we were talking about the concept of customer acquisition costs internally recently. So usually it gets used in SaaS because there's sometimes, I think, more sophistication around the investor table that is asking questions about that. Small business that doesn't have a board and sophistication, they still have customer acquisition costs, but they don't think about it the same way. The example we were using was for a nonprofit. So you don't have customers, but you have donors, and there is such a thing as a donor acquisition cost. And
Mhm.
having the ability to understand all of that, like how much does it cost you to get one? Where are they coming from? What works? What attracts them? I think it just makes everything work so much better. And I think that concept can feel so out of reach for a small business because it's like perceived to be expensive. So I've heard you talk about your mission and your vision and why you started Zeta. So what is your passion for data in small businesses, and what drove you to start Zeta?
Yeah, I think what really motivates me is democratizing data analytics and making it accessible and instant for small and medium businesses that otherwise wouldn't have access to a lot of this data. And what we are doing with Zetta is leveraging the power of AI and automation to help make data analytics almost instant and affordable and at a fraction of a cost. So what used to take years is now days. So that barrier to entry, in general, I think that's what AI is doing, is reducing the barrier to entry. So there is a more level playing field. And I think it's critical, especially for small businesses, to be very data driven and make, because it's going to help them make better decisions. And that's how they're going to win against the larger companies, is making better decisions faster. And I think that time and cost is really what I think companies like Zetta are now helping these small, medium businesses achieve.
So as the technology's evolved over time, AI is not a new thing necessarily, but it's a new thing to most of the world in terms of access to it. But when your first gig in data, was it at Eucarian? Was that the first one? Or
My very first one was at Target.
the
And
tar
yes, it was at
what was
Target.
that like? What was it like? What was the data infrastructure like back then? Like, how has the technology changed and evolved? And I'm asking because I'm just trying to help provide context for, like, why has this been so out of reach, and why did it take years and millions of dollars to get something that you can now get now, like,
Yeah.
in a matter of days and weeks and for a fraction of the cost? Like, what has changed?
Yeah, and so at a large company, I think that the pro is that there is a large team and a large budget. So every department had their analytics function. There was a data engineering function, and so it was probably several hundred people, if not 1,000 people, focused on data and analytics to power. And Target was extremely data driven to start with because they knew that's the only way they can keep up or beat Amazon, and
Yeah.
they were very clear about that investment. And so they were very advanced very early on. So I think that was a great way to start my career, to see how data analytics can be done right. But back then, I would say it's definitely more in the BI world, because a lot of small SMBs live in the spreadsheet world. And
Yes.
15 years ago, companies have been in the BI world where everything is built manually. You get a data warehouse, data ingestion tools, you're building everything, you're building dashboards, you're analyzing manually. A lot of building and manually analyzing has been happening. And that's been, I would say, until today. And now we're moving into AI. So it's from that spreadsheet to BI to AI. And with AI, it's helping automate and provide automated insights and even automated board decks now, which helps eliminate over 80% of the grunt work so that teams can focus on the strategic work. And I think that's how really data analytics is now evolving, into a more of a growth and strategic function, and to really help drive growth for companies. So it's both the foundational data and AI capabilities, but also how the data gets used to grow the business. And that data maturity is accelerating because if you think about the data maturity curve, it is what happened, why it happened, what will happen, but what do we do next to grow? And I think where a lot of companies are stuck in that first phase, maybe the second phase, but I think with AI, it's really helping push the boundary of, no, we can actually focus more on how to use data to provide actionable insights to grow the business. And I think a lot of the earlier, less mature portions are now covered by AI and automation.
So to make it, I may butcher this, but bear with me. Make it relatable to somebody who does not live in your world, that doesn't really understand what even like a data warehouse might look like. So if you're a small business owner and you have HubSpot and you keep your customer data there, and maybe you're using Asana to manage projects, and maybe you have QuickBooks, so you get your financial data there. Maybe you're using Slack and email and you got all these different data points that are disconnected, but you want to connect them. You would take all of those data fields and you would put them in some type of relational database or a data warehouse, so you could get all of that data about one specific customer. And then you would use a BI tool like Power BI or probably Tableau, and you would visualize certain data sets that you would want to see for your team. And a lot of that is very manual. And I guess what you're describing with AI, is there two parts to it? So it's, you can use AI to make creating the database a heck of a lot easier. And you can use it to generate automated insights once you have the data organized the way that you want. Am I playing that right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of framing it because there are two key components, right? One is piecing all the data together. The second is analyzing all of that data through automated insights or automated dashboards or even board
Mhm.
decks automated. So I think there are two portions. What currently we have solved for is primarily the AI data analyst, which is the second portion, which is all automated analytics in many ways, which is what a traditional analyst does. What we are tackling next is more the AI data engineer, which is helping piece together all of this data in a more automated way. And I think that's where, at the core of all of this, what enables AI to really make all of this happen is a semantic layer. And you can think of that as a data dictionary with metrics, definitions, and formula so that there is context for the AI. The reason AI works, for example, ChatGPT or Claude, they work
Yeah.
really well because they have the entire internet's data to train on. Whereas internally, when we're trying to leverage AI for data analytics, there is not much business context. There isn't much metadata. There isn't much context or written text around it. And I think that is fundamentally a new way of doing data analytics because traditionally in BI, you build, right? And there's no data dictionaries, there's no common definitions, there's none of that. But the way AI works is it's entirely flipped in terms of how you build data analytics in the new era. You start with the semantic layer, which is you define all your metrics, where it comes from, how you define them, and the formula, and describe them, and how you want to slice and dice all of this data. All of that is almost defined first in a semantic layer,
Mhm.
and then everything else is done automatically. So I think that's where, companies currently don't even have data dictionaries or semantic layers. So it's a very
It's
new
like
concept for
it's like
everybody.
is it like Excel formulas and then data visualization? Is that basically, it's like a big dimensional database in Excel with formulas, and then you can visualize it and make it look pretty? Is that what, like, most, like, low scale analytics systems
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Currently, yeah, most analytics, in fact, most companies, even a lot of AI companies currently, I've spoken to some CFOs, they're still doing a lot of work in spreadsheets. And then they're creating charts and pulling data together. Their teams are spending weeks and months. And I think all of what's happening with these tools, we're now able to create it in a more automated way, which I think is very exciting because it's such a productivity tool for a
Mhm.
company moving forward.
Yeah, I can honestly and humbly share that we were building our budget for next year, and we were thinking, "All right, we gotta get some data engineers, we gotta get database, we gotta spend dollars on consulting so that we can build this thing, and we can build it in a way that maybe someday we can use AI to help us get smarter." And then I met Harini, and it's forced us to kind of rethink our entire strategy around, like, this is like a shortcut. Like, this, in a matter of maybe weeks, maybe a little longer, we can get to a point where it's not going to be the end state we want to get to, because we have work to do to get our internal data cleaned up. But we can get a heck of a lot more out of what we are doing today just by using a platform like Zeta. So it's opened my eyes. It's like blows my mind how much quicker you can do this. So is the data engineering part, is that the expensive part for companies? Like, when you have to spend a lot of human capital dollars on data engineering, is that what makes it expensive?
Yes, I think there are a couple of parts to what makes it expensive. Generally, companies need definitely one is the data infrastructure, but also it's the data engineers who build and architect or connect the data.
Yeah.
But then it's also the data analysts and data scientists who are helping field hundreds of questions that they keep
Ah,
receiving. So it's really data teams are overloaded with questions. And I think that's where tools like Zetta that have an AI data analyst can help alleviate that burden because
yeah.
it can automatically answer the question with, hey, here's a summary, here's a chart, here's the data to download. And the way I look at it is there are generally three types of users in companies. The first type is the power users. Oh, I'm going to go answer my own questions. I'll either use Sweet SQL and Python or dashboards, and I'm going to analyze my own data. And so
Hmm.
but that's a very small subset. The second type of user is, oh, I have a specific questions. I just need that answered now. That's where the AI data analyst comes in. You ask a specific question in English, it's
Yep.
going to give you the answer. And then the third type of user is, just tell me everything I need to know. I don't have time to look into
So what?
all of,
Give me the
which is
so what.
exactly.
That's my style. Yeah.
That is all leaders, right? And I think, and we need to put the power into the hands of the leaders, and that's where the automated insights become very powerful. Is when you're able to then give a quick summary of everything they need to know, along with a board deck, right? And I think that becomes extremely powerful to enable and provide accessibility of data to everybody. Because right now,
Hmm.
data is accessible only to power users who
Yep.
know how to use the data and how to interpret the data. With AI coming into the picture, it's suddenly making it accessible to everyone in the company to make more data informed decisions.
Yep. Our attention span as humans is like going down by the day. So if you have to go, because we have Power BI, and I know
Yeah.
what that's, you got to go in there and run a bunch of filters, and it's like most people are just gonna, if it doesn't hit them in the face,
Yep.
is obvious. They're probably gonna lose interest. They're not gonna check. They're not gonna, the adoption will drop off. So I agree with that. And then for small businesses, right? So for Highline, our thing is that we're trying to help founders and operators become better finance minded. We think they can be better operators if they have a finance muscle. And one of our theses is it is a data play and it's a data strategy, but our data is the general ledger and all of the information you can extract from somebody's financial operations.
Yep.
And, the ability to provide real-time financial data using tools that leverage AI, and so much of it requires the front end of the system, the entry point of the data that has to be thought about. So it's all being recorded real time. And then you can get access to it real time. So that takes a lot of like financial operation engineering. That's our whole thing. So I totally get your point. Like the rest of your business, there's so much operational data. It's kind of the same thing. And it comes down to you also have to have good systems in place to get the most out of a tool like this. So for small businesses, if you were to give some advice, what are the mission critical software tools they need to build a data strategy that would serve them? So it doesn't have to be targets, but it has to be enough. What are some of the tools you think they should be thinking about putting in place if they don't have them today?
Yeah, I think the reason it is so important for SMBs to start thinking about leveraging more data analytics and AI is because currently most small SMBs, they focus more on lagging indicators from the data, which is
100%.
a lot of revenue data, the general ledger data. They're all
No.
they're lagging indicators.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of data analytics focuses on the leading indicators, everything along acquisition, activation, the engagement, what features are users using, how's retention, so all of that. And a lot of times the leading indicators give red flags even a year ahead before you see it in the lagging indicators
Yep.
with revenue. And you can act in more real time when you have access to the leading indicators. And so to me, when you combine the leading and lagging indicators together, that's when it becomes so powerful to grow your business and to act in time and before it's too late. So I think
Yep.
that's why it's so important. In terms of the best way to start getting there is, one, ensure that all the data is accessible and that there's data sources ready. The good news is a lot of smaller companies use tools such as, let's say, HubSpot or
Yep.
Salesforce on marketing and sales side. They use Stripe or ChargeBee on the revenue side for billing systems. And then perhaps they use something like a Segment to capture all their events data, or sometimes in-house systems, or they use QuickBooks for accounting.
Yep.
And so I think the great news is that all of these have standard data connectors and APIs, which there's not much work that each company needs to do with those systems. because a tool like Zetta can easily pull together data directly from those source systems. But where the companies need to focus on is their internal product usage data, right? If you want to understand where your users are clicking, what they're doing, what features they're using, there has to be a planned way of tracking all of that,
Yep.
and in a clean way and in a structured way, so that you can then use that data and combine it with everything else. For example, if you want to do marketing attribution or sales attribution, you need good product usage data, or like when they converted, where they converted, and all of
Yep.
that tied into marketing attribution. So I would say that's where product events data is something that's one area of investment that companies will need to work on. And then the second is ensuring good data quality. Data trying to do its part we have anomaly detection with data, where we tell, hey, if there is some wild swings going on, there's probably either a data issue or something that you need to look into. However, it's junk in, junk out, right? I think at the end of the day, we need to ensure that the source systems have good, reliable data.
Yep. I think it really comes down to, you got to have customer data,
Yep.
right? You got to have employee data, you have to have financial data, and you have to have operational data.
Yeah.
And product, like to say product, every industry has a product. And the thing that you
Yeah.
sell is your product. You may not call it a product, but it is a product. And there is an experience that your client or customer has with that product that you have to be able to measure. If you can't measure it somehow through some type of interaction, then you're never going to be able to capture the data. It doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit, a marketing agency, a SaaS company, a hardware company. If you don't have that, you can't get all the way there. But I don't think this is like a big leap for most small businesses. Most of them have started adopting some of these off the shelf tools. And so much of it comes down to process
Yes.
and diligence in how you use the systems. Because, and we're going to jump to FP&A in a second, which I want to nerd out on this but we for years have been trying to build like an FP&A practice, and we have one. But the problem is you can only do so much. You can't do it without good data. If you don't have good customer level data, you can't really do it the way that it should be done. And to go back and clean up the data when you're resource strapped, it becomes like that's not the biggest priority. Like, we'll get to that. We'll do that later. And you're like a hamster on a wheel. Like you're probably never going to do it if you don't just bite the bullet and do it. So for FP&A, when we were talking, I'm thinking about, all right, I can see how this is going to accelerate Heinlein's data strategy. And there's FP&A, I would say financial planning analysis is baked into that, but with so many other layers of operational data to support it. And I started thinking about the potential for FP&A in finance. Like, the way to do that is in Excel. That's what they're doing in Excel right now. Yeah. And maybe the best companies have access to clean data from other systems, CRMs, whatever. It's probably not the majority, especially sub mid-market. How does Zeta challenge conventional thinking about even FP&A?
Yes. Yeah, I think great question, because when I was heading data of various companies, my team actually helped partner with the finance FP&A team to help them come up with the right forecast, because we had to use all the leading indicators to help inform, how we are projected to end the month, the year, and the following year, and manage expectations with investors. So I think from that perspective, to be able to do good FP&A, have good forecasts and know where to invest the dollars, we really need good data analytics as a foundation to understand, where are the problem areas? Is it in the acquisition? Is it in activation? Is it in engagement? Or is it retention? And so that we know where to focus. So I think that's where it's so important to have good data analytics to inform and have good FP&A practice as well.
Keep going on this. So a general ledger it's a database, right? So depending on how you record all the transactions in a general ledger, there could be many dimensions of information attached to it. And FP&A, and I would say like budgeting, traditionally it's done based on a general ledger, like it's a P&L, it's a balance sheet. And I find myself thinking, like, why, if you had access to all the inputs, all the data in a tool like Zeta, and I know you haven't built it to be an FP&A tool, but isn't there a world where like that, you're not doing that in the spreadsheet anymore?
Yeah. Yes, you're 100% right that it can definitely get there because a lot of the companies that I've worked with, my team's reports were the inputs for the accounting teams. For
Yep.
example, we pulled data out of, for example, systems like Stripe, pieced it all together. And so at the end of the day, I think definitely 100% the data analytics can be that source system for analytics, but also it can help close books. But I think but it definitely needs more expertise
Needs more work. Yeah.
to get it to that level. However, that is a future possibility, 100%.
Yeah. I can just see, give me all my pipeline data, give me my customer level data, give me my churn metrics, give me my expansion metrics, give me net dollar retention.
Yeah,
There's probably some inputs you need to make because you still need to set goals and targets, but I could see a world where that just kind of happens somehow, some way in a matter of like seconds.
yeah,
And then you
yeah.
can play with it, you talk to it, you make modifications. But man, I just think whether it's next month or in a few years, I just think you're going to see it get to that point.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think it's going to be there within a few years because we're already at a point where we're able to automate so much, even creating, automated insights, but also automated board decks, which is, I think, from there to a point where you can start interacting with it in a more live manner. I think that's very near where it can help craft a story with you. And it's very similar to working with a human where the more you work with the human understands, oh, this is what Matt's looking for. And I think similarly with AI, we have to be a little patient because it has to learn in some ways the best way to work with you.
Yep. I think that's so right. So yeah, my mind's just been like exploding. We're totally going to have an off camera workshop where you're going to help me automate my board deck and we can get
Awesome.
all those graphs and charts pulled in there once we get farther along. That sounds incredible. So in terms of, and I'm thinking about finance in general, I'm thinking about like all the humans that are doing these, and it's the same with data scientists, all humans that were doing all of these things. I'm a big proponent of, I think you can start to 10x people's
Yeah.
potential in terms of how much they can handle and do. So when you think about the skills and the transformation that humans need to go through to be successful in their career, like the modern finance
Mhm.
person 5 years from now, what does that person need? What is their skill set? What are the things they need to know how to do?
Yeah. I honestly believe that every technology has only created more jobs, but different types of
Yep.
jobs. And that evolution is just natural. And I think with AI and within data analytics as well as finance, it's going to shift towards newer types of roles, right? On the analytics side, for example, it's going to shift towards two types of roles. One type of role is someone who is managing this whole semantic layer and fine tuning the AI system. That's, I think, one type of role. The other type of role is more on the business side of data analytics, where we're using this data to grow the business because a lot of companies currently think of data analytics as some, operational cost, or like it's a cost function, but
Hmm.
it's actually a growth function if leveraged correctly. And I think that's what AI is enabling is data teams are stuck doing the grunt work. No, AI can handle that. Focus your teams on the more productive, growth oriented projects where they can truly drive growth for your company. And I think that's the power of some of these tools. So I think it's elevating in many ways, it's removing the grunt work, but also it's helping elevate the human work to higher cognitive skills work. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of an evolution as well. And I think that's where I see this as more and more. There's two types of roles, very much a business growth focused role and a very managing the AI system type of a role. And similarly on the finance side, there could start being overlaps between the business data folks and finance folks because ultimately these are people who need to know how to work with the AI systems, but also how it all works together and how to use that to grow the business. So I think there could be some potential overlaps between finance folks starting to get more technical and data folks starting to get more business focused. So there's, I think, some potential merging happening there.
I could not agree with you more. And I'll frame it slightly differently because we talk about this with our team internally. So every business has customers, every customer has pain. Your business exist to solve pain, sometimes there's grunt work required to actually be able to solve the pain.
Yeah.
A lot of times, absent technology, the job can be the grunt work. And sometimes you forget that there's pain to be solved. And that's what they really came to you for. So I think AI technology eliminates the grunt work and provides everybody, to your point, the opportunity to level up and actually focus on the things that cause your customer pain. And I think for finance, it's systems, right? There's going to be a role where you have to know how the systems connect together. You have to be the conductor of the systems. It's probably not going to be one big ERP system. It's going to be a bunch of systems that do a bunch of different things that you have to understand how it works, how the data flows in, and how to keep it moving. And then you have to be able to focus on like advisory stuff, the stuff that they came to, the painful stuff where you can create value for your clients. So I agree. I think everybody wins, right? I think it's good for professionals because they get more fulfilling work, and it's good for clients because you actually start to get more value out of the services. It all just starts to look very different. I think that's going to scare the hell out of a lot of people who are comfortable doing the gruntish work, but you're not going to stop that. That's going to happen no matter what.
Exactly, exactly. It is the future. It's a matter of time of when each company chooses to adopt it. But I actually think the small and medium businesses are going to be the perfect catalyst because
Mhm.
they are so early in this journey. They don't have the fear of losing. Oh, I've invested so much into this. I've poured millions of dollars and I have large teams. What are they going to do? They don't have that kind of a question in their mind. So I actually think small, medium businesses are going to win faster than some of the larger companies in this AI space.
Yeah, I mean, there's a benefit to starting from scratch.
Yeah,
Like, when you
100%.
don't have to undo it all,
Exactly.
think about if Target started today, like, if they hired Harini today to go in
Yeah.
and redo their data strategy, how big of an effort would that be?
That would be crazy. It's easier to go from spreadsheets to AI than BI to AI because
Yeah.
the complexity is so high between the people and the systems and the processes. So I think especially because BI and AI are flipped on its head with the way it's even implemented. And I think that's the fundamental shift. It's completely new architecture. So it's hard to tear down something, especially if it's working for the company. It's really hard to tear it down. So I think they almost have to build an AI in parallel because that is the future, and that's the only way to stay competitive in the future.
Yeah, I think, mm, my guess is, today it's never been easier to start a company,
Yes,
especially if it's a digital company like Zeta. To start a company, you need a laptop, you need a small team, you need insurance, you don't
yes,
need a lot of, like, tangible things to do it. It's low cost. You start one today, you can get all the same things, but now you get access to tools and AI and things that I think you're gonna be able to build a much more scaled company faster with less resources than you ever have, and you'll be able to catch up with some of the companies that have been around for a while because it will be slow for them to turn the ship. And they actually may play ostrich and bury their head in the sand for a while until they realize they have to.
exactly, exactly. And I think that the speed and quality is what's going to help the smaller companies win this race. And that's what AI is doing with making things more instant and accessible. That barrier to entry no longer exists. And actually, I completely agree with you that there are more businesses starting now than ever. The record number of new businesses, and that's only going to accelerate. I envision a future where everybody is an entrepreneur with AI workers. Imagine that beautiful world where we're all thriving and
That's
coexisting
wild.
harmoniously, where we are all small, medium businesses, we're all successful, and there's enough oxygen for all of us, right? And I think
Yep.
that's really the future that AI is empowering us. It's giving us that creative freedom and to live our life purpose. And I think that's the future I really look forward to.
I love that. I think that's well said. Okay. So a couple of foundational things to just end the discussion on AI. Small business owner, I got nothing. Maybe I track my customers in a spreadsheet. I'm using
Yeah,
QuickBooks. How do you get started? If you were going to sit down and make a concerted effort to now put a data strategy in place, basic one, how do you get
yeah.
started?
Yeah, I would say the way we work with our customers is in two parts. I think first is we try to understand what are their key strategic objectives, and in terms of there's acquisition, the entire customer life cycle. There's acquisition, activation, engagement, retention, and revenue. First, we help them measure across that funnel. I think that's the first step that we work with businesses to say, hey, first we need visibility across this funnel so that you understand, how your marketing and sales is performing, but in depth, not just a surface level metric. Because a lot of
Hmm.
companies that are doing this spreadsheet analysis, their LTV and CAC are super high level at the macro level, right? But that's not actionable. And what data analytics does is it starts becoming actionable because you know exactly what marketing campaigns are driving
Yep.
your revenue, where the best customers are coming from, or which product features are getting used by the high retention customers. So overall, I would say that that's where we start focusing on setting up their their key metrics across the customer life cycle. So align on that with them. And then we also try to identify where are they currently spending a lot of time. It could be where they're like, oh, I currently spend 2 weeks trying to put decks together, whether it's a weekly review deck or a monthly board deck. So then we help them integrate Zetta's board decks into their process. And so I think that's where we try to understand and work with companies. But that's where Zetta in many ways is 80% product and 20% service, because we are trying to help companies with even helping define what they should measure and what are best practices, and helping offer the expertise that we've provided to large companies and bringing that to SMBs to help them approach businesses in the same way that larger companies do. And I think that framework becomes very powerful and a great way to then start looking at the business. So I would say that's how we first approach it. But from there, we then get into, hey, what are the current tools? Where are the data gaps? And then we work with the companies to ensure they then know how to fill those data gaps. And I think it tends to be different for different companies. But in general, I would say it's more around uh, the product usage and their customer database. I think those are the things that we work with them the most about. And from there, we're able to move forward. But a lot of this is just helping them, one, get visibility into what's happening, why it's happening, what's expected to happen, but also making them so much more productive, because what would have taken them hours or actually weeks of manual work is now available to them instantly. So I think it's definitely game changing for small businesses to adopt newer technologies. It can feel very different at the start because spreadsheets are amazingly flexible and easy. And I think, however, they're not actionable, right? They're great
Hmm.
high level storytelling, but we need to get it to the next level of making it actionable. And for that, we need to get the insights from the data and then feed that back into the source systems to make it accessible. For example, putting the data back into maybe a HubSpot for campaign automation
Yep.
or back into Salesforce. So I think that's where the actionability and automation all is enabled by data analytics.
Yeah, so I think it's still so overwhelming for folks to understand it. So like, where do you, if, because it's like, it's everywhere. You read about AI, it's everywhere. It's blasted all over. It's all over Google. It's all over every publication. Like, where do you go to get your truth on AI and what's happening in the industry? Book, public newsletter. Where do you go?
Yeah. My method is actually keeping track of where all the funding is going to with the latest startups, because that's going to tell you the future. Sometimes it may take 10 years for a lot of these companies to truly materialize and get market share, but that gives a great indication of what is the technology out there, how is everything getting used, and how ultimately how can all of this help push companies forward. So that's, I would say, one big thing that I try to
Yep.
follow, because it just helps you stay at the cutting edge. And of course, I try to listen to a lot of thought leaders out there as well in podcasts. Especially, I love podcasts because it is really, in many ways, democratizing media, right? And I think I love that there are more voices out there today, especially from so many people with so much expertise now. So I would say those are the two main ways that I try to stay up with it. But it can get overwhelming. But I think the bigger thing to focus on is trying to understand how things truly work. And for that, I, tell people just try building your own app or system. It's easier than ever before. And you don't need to know much coding or anything else. Just build something. And that's what I tell my kids as well, that I want them to build an AI app in a company. They can pick
Love
whatever
that.
they want to do, but just do it. Today, you don't even need budget. You don't need much technical skills either. All you need is the idea and the drive and a vision of why you're building this and the difference you want to make in the world. So that's really a way I look at it.
All right. So how about one thought leader that you love on AI? Who is it?
So yeah, there are many out there. There's one thought leader called Soul. She's with Amazon, and she's an AI thought leader who communicates AI concepts in a very easy to understand manner. So I really like that, and I also love how she also adopts the latest ways of communication, which are more very TikTok style videos on LinkedIn as well,
Yeah.
and like it just engaging, finding engaging ways to share more about AI and making it simple and easy for everyone to understand. Yeah, that's definitely the type of influencer that, that expert that I look up to as
Okay.
well.
So well, I got to check it out because I have not listened, but I will. And I think, Harini, this has been awesome conversation. I think, man, I think everybody out there listening, I think you got to get in touch with Harini and Zeta and learn more about how you can level up your data strategy. Even if you're too small or you think you're too small, like you're never too small. I think this is something that benefits everybody. So, Harini, thank you so much for joining. And
Thank
man, love to have you back on someday and see how kind of Zeta is progressing. We'll
Thank you
talk to
so
you
much
soon.
for having me. Yeah, it's been wonderful speaking with you. I think you're such a pleasure to speak to. So thank you again. Yeah, I look forward to coming back here soon.
All right. Right on. Harini, have a good rest of the day.
Thank
Talk to you
you. All
soon.
right. Thank you.